Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Growth Marketing Webinar Series brought to you by Business to Community, Growth Marketing Conference, and Bullpine Interactive. I'm very excited for today's webinar. I'm Derek Haney, CEO of Bullpine Interactive, a San Diego-based social media marketing agency, and head of content and social media at Growth Marketing Conference, and have a new title, which is Growth Marketing Community Ambassador, which I'll tell you about in just a second. The recording of this presentation will be available within 48 hours, and we'll be sending out an email to give you access. Please, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. We will be asking and answering questions at the end, so be sure to stick around until the end to make sure you get your questions answered. Now, if you learned something today, and you will certainly be learning something, I'm really excited especially, don't hesitate to take a screen grab of what you see and share it on Twitter using hashtag GrowthMarketingConf, and you can @GrowthTactics, @Loveday, which is a sweet Twitter handle, and me, I'm @SixPeppers, and I'll share that for you in just a second. Now, I want to tell you really quickly about this webinar, which will be going up on the Growth Marketing Virtual Summit 2018. What is the Virtual Summit? It's a 3-day free online event with dozens of speakers and sessions and virtual networking. I will send a link to you in the chat so you can sign up for the virtual summit, and there is a secret surprise on the back end when you do sign up. So just hang on a second and I'll get that link out to you. I'm really excited about the virtual summit. Now, we've got an amazing talk lined up for you. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Lance Loveday. Lance is the founder and CEO of Closed Loop. Closed Loop specializes in helping high-growth companies realize massive profit through online advertising on Google AdWords, Facebook, programmatic display, and other channels. Closed Loop has worked with numerous high-growth brands and managed over $500 million in digital ad spend for their clients. Lance is also a mentor for 500 startups, a 3X founder, and has bootstrapped Closed Loop to over $500 million in ARR. Lance, take it away.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate the kind intro, and yes, I hope everybody learned something today. I'm really excited about this presentation myself. This is all brand new content that we've put together. We've got some data to share with you from past client campaigns, some before-after examples, and I want to leave people with some meaty tips and tricks that they can apply to their own campaigns, and that's one big goal. The second big goal I have, though, is to change how people think about digital advertising and hopefully start to see it as much more of an opportunity to be pursued and not a cost. So I'm going to consider this success if people leave, yes, with hopefully multiple meaty takeaways, and then secondly, hopefully thinking a little bit differently about the digital advertising landscape. So it might be a tall order, but I'm going to give it a shot. So with that, let me dive in and just to share how the world has changed a little bit, especially even just the last couple of years. Historically, with digital advertising and PPC specifically, there was this concept of the efficient frontier, and people would find their spot on this efficient frontier where they'd trade off ROI and lead volume, and then they'd move incrementally from there. But for the most part, people were kind of on a level playing field, and it worked out pretty well, and the distribution looked something like this. But more recently, we've seen this evolution toward a few advertisers really beating everybody else and really becoming the winners in any given niche, and then everyone else. We call those leaders exponential advertisers. So that is interesting to me from an economic perspective, because it shouldn't be possible in an efficient marketplace to increase both ROI and lead volume and dramatically outpace the competition in this way. But we see this pattern playing out time and again in multiple industries. And so I wanted to explore that and then try to understand why that's happening. Obviously, our goal is to put our clients in the upper right quadrant up there, but I'm really interested from a macro perspective as to how and why that's possible. So I want to break that down a little bit in this webinar too. So I've put together 7 new advertising tactics for 2018, and I'm going to start off with the first one here. And the first one really is about thinking properly about how to approach advertising. So let me do a little myth busting and compare it to the new reality. And starting with that concept that advertising and these PPC auctions are efficient markets, that's the myth. The reality is that these are wildly inefficient markets, and that might be kind of alarming at first, but the reality is it creates opportunity for those who really know how to get the most out of these platforms. So that's the first myth. Second one is this notion that you should settle for incrementality in terms of increasing volume and performance from these campaigns. We take a different mindset. We think the upside is exponential, and I'll explain that more coming up. But it has a lot to do with how you think about things. If you're only looking at what's in front of you, you're probably only going to get incremental improvement from there. You need to think much more expansively. Third, this idea that advertising is a cost center, and we spend $50,000 a month, and that's what we spend, is kind of antiquated. Really, we should be looking at advertising as a profit center and saying, all right, what we want to do is maximize our volume subject to our ROI goals. And if we do that, then we can turn advertising into a profit center, and it can be a source of massive growth. And then lastly, this idea that advertising is strategy or creative driven, that's really kind of more of a Mad Men kind of thing. And now advertising is much more execution driven, and there's just so much opportunity to run circles around the competition by executing better. And that's a real departure, especially in the last, again, 2 to 3 years as the complexity levels of these campaigns have come up. And then actually there's one more. This idea that average is average and you can settle for good enough, I think is a myth with advertising now, because as we're starting to see, average or just good enough is actually losing, and it creates you end up losing market share. So let me drill down on that one a little bit more and break down what it means for an individual advertiser. If you consider this your opportunity landscape, this is kind of a mathematical concept. It's the idea of a local proxima versus a global proxima. So if you are starting here and moving incrementally up from there, and your competitor is starting on a different hill, a higher hill, and trying to get to the top of that hill, well, I mean, the deck is stacked so far against you that you're guaranteed, unfortunately, to lose. And that, I think, starts to explain why, in many cases, some competitors always seem to be doing better. It's because their campaigns are structured differently. They're literally playing a different game and climbing a different hill in this metaphor. And I think that for many people starts to explain how and why that's possible. It just has to do with how the campaigns are architected. So the takeaways for this myth versus reality are to really ask yourself, if your campaigns haven't been completely rebuilt in the last 1 or 2 years, evaluate doing that. Consider rebuilding the campaigns. It really, that much has changed. It's worth considering. And if you want some easy things to check for, just to see if they, if you think you might be bleeding or not, here's just a list of simple things. I mean, your search click-through rate has got to be above 1%, and that's a floor. I mean, it should be well above that, hopefully. Your remarketing audiences should be built out. You should be using at least 3 ad extensions. You should be taking advantage of ad scheduling, and yes, you should be making sure your quality scores are constantly improving. We'll talk more about that in a little bit as well. So there are the recommendations for step 1, and the overarching rec is face reality. So that's number 1 of 7. Let's move on to number 2 and look at some hard data, the new campaign health metrics that matter, I'm calling these. And we conduct a lot of different audits for different types of accounts over time. And we look at things a lot of different ways, but I'm summarizing now just a handful of the things that we look at that I think are most predictive of campaign health. And one of my favorites is this one. I think of it as kind of the campaign shape, but what it is really is visualizing your spend and ROI distribution. And in this case, size is the spend level for campaigns, and color is the ROI on the campaigns, where blue is good ROI and red is bad ROI. And when you visualize things in this way, it helps you to see things a little bit differently and think differently about your campaigns. And let me show you some of the patterns that jump out. So in the upper left quadrant, if you consider what that tells us when we look at it and how we interpret it, there are sufficient dark red boxes that make us think, you know what, we could probably get rid of some of those, turn them down or turn them off, and we would refer to that as light pruning. That would probably improve your ROI almost immediately. Whereas in the lower left, number 2 area, there are so much dark red that that's probably an argument for doing some seriously heavy pruning of that campaign. And again, by turning off your losers or turning down your losers, you're going to leave more budget to run on your winners and improve your overall ROI. On the middle column here, on number 3, what speaks to us there is we say, gosh, you know what? The campaign probably just isn't quite granular enough in that we're spending so much, half the budget on about 6 campaigns here. There's probably an opportunity to restructure those to tighten up the granularity and targeting a little bit, and by doing so, squeeze more ROI. Versus number 4, where there's almost no granularity at all, and that would indicate to us that you might consider starting over and doing a full rebuild. Number 5, we'd look at that and say, you know what, that's looking pretty good. There's not too much dark red. I mean, there's a lot more blue than red in general. I'd want to understand that top left red box and see if there's something going on there. Might be a problem. But overall, that is indicative of a pretty healthy campaign. And it's not that there's a single cookie cutter way to do all of this stuff, but this is representative for us of a pretty healthy campaign. There's more than one way to have a healthy campaign look, but this was one example of one we've done that definitely didn't raise any red flags for us. And then finally, number 6 down here. The concern there is that there isn't much in the way of dark blue. There's a little bit of dark red, but there's just kind of average performance throughout, and there's probably a granularity opportunity as well to restructure a little bit and just reallocate spend accordingly. So not as big a red flag as, say number 4 over here, but it definitely hints to us that there's probably a spend reallocation opportunity there. So that's one of the ways that we really recommend people just think about their campaigns. Budget allocation and distribution can be a huge strategic lever, and unfortunately some people just don't take advantage of it and structure their campaigns to empower themselves to use that lever. And we definitely recommend that, and this visualization can help. The next one we look at is visualizing your geographic performance. And this is always fascinating whenever we run these patterns. It helps you, similar to the last one, uncover opportunities you otherwise can't really see very well in the raw data. But when you present it in this way, the insights really do jump off the screen. So in this example, there was a lot of underperformance. Again, in this case, size of the bubble is indicative of spend, and color is ROI. In this case, a lot of these cities in the Midwest just were getting low performance, and so we were able to jump in and modify some bids and try to fix that. Now look at some other patterns that we've done from different audits over time. You see some wildly different patterns that indicate different optimization opportunities. In number 2 over here, I think this one's fascinating because what this says is you're killing it in the major metro markets. You're getting great volume in ROI. You got a lot of big blue dots, but there are also just a ton of small red dots. So all your secondary markets, you're not only obviously getting lower volume, but you're really getting killed from an ROI perspective. So how would we fix that? How would we apply a bid modifier maybe to take advantage of that? And then the same types of patterns can carry through. But the takeaway is to apply some geographic bid modifiers in areas where you're clearly winning or losing, so you can boost your ROI overall. It's, in our view, it's kind of an underutilized optimization lever. but it can be really powerful, and it can give you an easy 5, 10, sometimes 20-point swing in ROI by taking advantage of it. So strongly recommend looking at geographic performance as well. Third one we like to look at, we love to aggregate match type performance as shown here. And it helps uncover easy optimization opportunities to, again, reallocate spend. And for us, it's another signal of overall campaign health. So in this case, the client is spending a majority of their budget on broad, but they're getting far better ROI in terms of the cost per lead on exact match. So our first question would be, well, can we just reallocate a bit of that broad budget or budget that's going to broad terms to the exact match terms? Is there upside there? Let me show you a few other examples of how that's played out. And that pattern tends to hold true. Exact match tends to give you the best ROI, and sometimes broad is better than exact. Sometimes broad is better than phrase. Sometimes phrase is better than broad. But generally, exact match is going to give you the best ROI. So how do we allocate spend to take advantage of that? Well, if exact match is performing the best, but your exact match impression share is low, we would say just under 80%, then that absolutely signals a spend reallocation opportunity. And it could be low-hanging fruit because you could increase your ROI just about overnight by reallocating that spend. It might require a bit of restructuring, breaking those keywords into their own campaigns, but could be well worth doing if it gets you some additional ROI out of the campaigns. It's kind of hard to aggregate this and put it together in this view sometimes, but having that big picture view can really make a huge difference. And the other thing this tells us is how the spend is being allocated by match type. And if we see something like in this example on the left, our initial instinct would be to say, gosh, you know what, this campaign is over-reliant on broad match. And in general, what we'd like to see is 60 to 80% of the spend on exact match and let the remainder fall to modified broad match, maybe with a little bit of use of phrase, although that's become much less utilized recently with the advent of modified broad match. So that's how we think about things, and another indicator of campaign health. Next one, I love this one, quality score distribution. A quality score is so critical to campaign health and has such an impact on your ROI. And what we do is we just put this distribution together to show you how many keywords have what quality score. So in this case, this campaign had more quality score 1 keywords than any other, which is a red flag by itself. But overall, the distribution is weighted to the lower side of the quality score spectrum, and that's an absolute red flag. So let me show you some more patterns. Oh, no, that's right. I'm talking about quality score and why it's important. Because I know people talk about it and there's a general understanding of it, but let me just break it down and show you numerically why this matters so much. So if you do a search on mesothelioma, which historically is one of the most expensive keywords you can bid on out there, I think CPCs are north of $100 now on this, and you want to understand how much people are paying. Well, I've kept reasonable max bids on this just for our purposes, but the price you pay is a function of your quality score and your bid, and obviously how much the person below you is paying. And so I won't get into the math of it, but we break it out here for you. And how it works out is that your bid multiplied by your quality score gives you your ad rank. And then the price you pay is 1 penny more than the person's bid below you. So, but that's weighted by the quality score. So it ends up being a huge swing. In this case, the person in the number 1 spot is paying almost half of the person in the number 2 spot, and less than that of the 3rd spot. So it's easy to believe that the person in the top spot is always paying the most, but it's not always the case, and you could argue rarely the case in high volume keywords where people have truly optimized their campaigns. So that's, I think, speaks to the power of quality score, why it's such a big deal, and why people like me harp on it so much, it absolutely impacts your campaign economics. So that's why we care so much about it. It's a huge swing. So the advertiser, again, in this example, is paying less than anybody else, even though they've got the highest spot and are getting the highest volume. So a few distribution examples for quality score. If we were to look at this one on the left, that's a bad distribution. That would be a major red flag for us. The second one, slightly less bad, weighted a little more toward the center. And then the third example over here on the right, that's pretty good. Generally, the distribution is weighted more toward the higher end of the quality score spectrum. And importantly, we do break out brand versus non-brand keywords as well, just so that we get a clear understanding of how that is breaking out. Huge indicator of campaign health, really, really important. And one of the things people ask about quality score too is, can you really improve it? And we actually pulled an example of a campaign quality score distribution before we took over managing campaigns, and then a few months after. And you can see the impact. It's weighted much more to the right post takeover, and we restructured the campaigns, we improved relevancy, we rewrote ad copy. We did a lot of things to help make this possible, but you can see the impact it had on overall quality scores. It was pretty dramatic, and the campaign economics and results ended up showing that. So it's important, and it is possible to change. So we want to drive that home for people for sure. And so that's just 4 examples of campaign health. I think they're pretty predictive of overall campaign health, and that if you just look at those 4 things, you'll probably get a reasonably good read on how your campaigns are doing overall, and probably uncover some really good opportunities for optimization. So the recommendation for step 2 is do that quick health check, pull together those 4 visualizations, and assess how your campaigns are doing overall. Now let's move on to number 3. And they get a little faster from here, I promise. Number 3 is optimize to deeper funnel metrics. Well, what do I mean by that? If you think about your conversion funnel, from top to bottom here, starting with impressions and ending with lifetime value, most organizations, most advertisers settle for optimizing to a front-end metric. In this case, leads or even clicks would be a front-end metric, right? Our recommendation is to go as deep down that funnel as you can and optimize to whatever deepest funnel metric you can get to. And going even just one step deeper than you are right now can have a massive impact. And let me show you what that means. So most organizations settle for optimizing the cost per lead, as I said. And on that basis, in this example, campaign A would be the winner. It's got the lowest cost per lead. But if you look at the deeper funnel analysis, you might find that the leads from campaign B convert to MQL at a higher rate. And then all of a sudden campaign B is winning. And if you take it down to sales qualified lead, well, it might be winning that much more because higher conversion rates, higher quality. And then if you look at actual revenue, all of a sudden now the campaign A that you're buying leads at $125 for and felt like you were winning, you realize performed 5 times worse from a revenue perspective than campaign B. That's the power of optimizing to the deeper funnel metric. And in terms of how it plays out in your campaigns, we actually did this for one client and published a case study on it where it just so happened we switched to optimizing from front-end leads to back-end sales qualified leads right around the start of the year. And so the chart here that we're showing is the spend distribution by campaign theme. And what this shows is how we ended up changing the spend allocation across campaigns. And these top ones are really interesting because what we realized was those leads that we thought were really too expensive for us to buy before turned out to be totally worth it, and we should be maxing those out. And some of those really cheap leads, the light blue there, well, we realized we'd been overpaying for those so-called cheap leads by about 30%, and so we reduced our distribution on those and made some other tweaks across the campaign similarly too. It totally changed how we valued different traffic sources. So it was a really big swing. And you, I think, can think not just about optimizing, down the funnel, but think about optimizing campaigns to other signals that indicate higher quality as well. And I apologize for the formatting here. This happened when we uploaded to the webinar system. But ask yourself if you can, in this case, the challenge we got from the client was, could we generate more medium and large company leads, change our lead mix from our paid campaigns? And we took that challenge on, and yeah, we were able to massively change the lead mix over time to get more medium and large company leads. So fewer small company leads, more large company leads, and collectively that allowed us to increase lead volume, or qualified lead volume, by 6x over about a 2-year time frame, while maintaining or even decreasing the cost per lead. And we did that by optimizing to quality, by fixing quality score, by doing a lot of these things that we talked about. But they all move together in concert. But when you do it all at the same time and you get everything moving together, it opens up massive volume potential. So recommendations for step 3, optimize to that deeper funnel metric. Create a trackable event for any signal that correlates to higher customer value. I used company size as one example. There may be others depending on your business. But in general, optimize to the deepest funnel metric you can, and you'll be ahead of 95% of people out there. And relative to your competition, if they're still optimizing to that front-end metric, you're going to run circles around them because you're going to know what that traffic is actually worth. And you're going to let them buy all the cheap leads, and you're going to cherry pick all the valuable traffic and leads, and you're going to gain share. So it can be a real source of competitive advantage. So that's number 3. Number 4, this is when I get to rant a little bit. Number 4, the recommendation is to be real about display. And I should caveat this by saying, these recommendations really are targeted more at direct response advertisers. So with that, here's my tough love about display. It's an important channel, no question. It does have a role in branding and awareness, but as a DR vehicle, the economics generally don't work, at least in our experience. Also, I feel like ad servers are inefficient. They don't justify their cost and usually tend up overcomplicating and becoming overkill for many clients. Also, manual ad buys just generally don't make sense for any but the largest buys. And yet we've done audits where we've found a lot of manual ad buying out there, and it just doesn't make sense to sign an insertion order for $1,000 or even $5,000. It's nuts. Programmatic buying, of course, is a very nice improvement and it has its place in our overall mix, but it isn't magic. And I feel like the hype may have gotten a little bit ahead of things on itself. And it speaks to the next point that view-through conversions just cannot be weighted as heavily as action or click-based conversions. And there may be some controversy I know about that, but that's our very strong view, and it's how we measure success ourselves. We break those apart. And in general, I've seen a lot of agencies that are very display-centric, pitching very display-centric media plans, and that's fine for branding and awareness. It's really not okay for campaigns where direct response is a primary objective. And then lastly, I would just leave you with the point that paid social, in my view, has far more game-changing potential than display. So rather than trying to squeeze more performance out of display, I would really recommend that people be up in their game from a paid social perspective, because I think there's a lot more room to run over time in paid social. So that's my rant on display. I'm sure that I'll generate some pushback on that, but that's our view on it. So the recommendations are, in general, we're saying don't spend more than 15 to 20% of your budget, again, for DR campaigns. Standardize on 1 or 2 display platforms. If you're on the Google Display Network and one DSP, you're fine. You've got total coverage at that point. Don't spread yourself too thin. Don't cause yourself reporting and tracking nightmares by getting spread too thin on your platforms. Creative is critical for display, but I see a lot of people spending so much time on the targeting and the tracking and so on that they really lose sight of the significance of creative. And so we advocate for a more balanced approach and making sure you're spending as much time on improving your creative as you are your targeting. And then, as I said before, always separate those view-through conversions from those click-through conversions and value them differently in reporting. And we do see that Google Display Network will give you far more click-through conversions in general than DSPs for what that's worth. Just an observation that we've found hold up. So that's display. Let's go to number 5. Number 5, I like this one. Don't spend more. May sound counterintuitive, especially coming from an agency, but that's how we think. Don't spend more. Buy the most valuable traffic first. So it's kind of a mindset shift. But from a tactical perspective, one of the things we look at as well is to say, hey, is there an opportunity to squeeze a little more, even down at the keyword level, out of our campaigns? And if we've got individual keywords that have a really good cost per conversion, but a low exact match impression share, again, an easy optimization opportunity. And we've highlighted the ones that fit that criteria in yellow here. So there's an easy spend reallocation opportunity for us to not spend more, but increase the ROI and buy the most valuable traffic first. So that's a kind of very tactical example of how we do it. Let me talk about the philosophy behind it a little bit. So from an economic perspective, spending more guarantees diminishing returns. The best ROI you're going to get is on your first few dollars that you spend. And if that's true, then you absolutely don't want to spend more before you push out what we call your opportunity curve, which probably has you asking, what is an opportunity curve? Well, let me dive into that and explain what we mean. Formatting. So ROI and spend are graphed here, and your opportunity curve is that relationship. Your first few dollars of spend are going to give you a pretty good ROI up until you reach a point of diminishing returns. And in that, I should have known better to play with these. There we go. So that's your point of diminishing returns, when you start to see ROI drop off. And then at some point you're going to hit your minimum acceptable ROI. And that gap between those 2 points is what we kind of think of as the sweet spot. That's the right level of spend for your organization based on your opportunity curve. And that's something you kind of have to discover and learn your way into. But most organizations, almost every organization really has a sweet spot, a level of spend that makes sense for them. And you have to discover yours. But you've got to also think about how you can push out that opportunity curve. It could look like this. It could look, when that's your sweet spot. It could look like this, and that's your sweet spot. And if you have 3 different competitors with these 3 different opportunity curves, well, it's pretty clear who's going to win, right? The yellow one is going to just beat the pants off everybody else in terms of both ROI and spend. But I would think about it differently. And what if we reframe it and say, well, what if it's the same company? And they can change the shape of their opportunity curve by improving their campaign economics. If they can increase their lead quality rate, increase their close rate, their deal value, their lifetime customer value, and so on. If they can pull all those different levers, they can move up or push out their opportunity curve. And so I would challenge people to think of the opportunity curve as looking more like this, as going up and to the right, so that your real opportunity curve looks like that. And that's a different way of thinking. It requires thinking a little bit more with a dynamic mindset of saying, how do I change all the variables and kind of growth hack my own campaigns so that I can squeeze more ROI and more volume out of them. And that, I think, helps to explain this outperformance that we see, where some campaigns, some advertisers in every space seem to be far distancing everybody else. It's because they've made that choice to do that and they've pushed out their opportunity curve. That's how we connect those dots. So the recommendations on this step are to do just that. Make sure you're buying the most valuable traffic first. Tactical things you can do a quick check on what % of your non-brand keywords haven't converted in the last 90 days. And if that number is above 40%, then you may have a pruning opportunity in front of you, especially if you're not maxing out your spend elsewhere. Secondly, you can check your impression share, as in the example we showed, for your best performing keywords. And if you're below 100%, then break them into their own campaigns where you can max your budget on those terms. But more broadly, think about how to maximize your growth subject to your ROI targets at any given time. And then, as I said, focus on pushing out your opportunity curve. That's going to really change the game for you. So that's number 5. All right. Number 6. I'm passionate about this one. Put the right person in the cockpit. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, think about the person who's managing your campaigns, who's actually at the controls of your campaigns. And we've put together some personas for these, for the different types of personalities that might be managing your campaigns. And so we've put them together in the form of what we call the relative awesomeness resultometer. And if you consider, going from left to right, the experience and professionalism level, it absolutely corresponds to the performance that you can get out of your campaigns. Some people just shouldn't be doing it at all. Obviously on the left, that's Jar Jar, right? I mean, we don't want a fraud manager in our campaigns. They're going to get horrible results. But we have a lot of newbies out there as well, and you're going to get hit or miss performance if you have a newbie managing the campaigns, versus the person who might be okay at it but has 4 other things on their plate. That's the multitasker, right? Versus the manager who might be great from a quant perspective and very analytical, but maybe doesn't fully understand the art side of managing and getting the most out of these campaigns. And who's got it all, of course, that's the master. They get the art, they get the science, they're experienced, they've been at this, they're dedicated to it. That's how you're going to really get up into that high performance zone. So ask yourself, who do you have at the controls of your campaigns? Who's allocating all those budget dollars for you? It probably was okay to have a junior person when the spend was at the lower levels, but now that the spend levels have gotten much higher for digital advertising, it makes a lot more sense to really be critical about who's at the controls and managing those campaigns for you. And it matters because the person who really knows what they're doing can absolutely get more out of those campaigns. They can find more opportunity. They structure the campaigns in a way that layers on different forms of targeting and uncovers pools of opportunity where they can optimize the campaigns, get the most out of them, and then expand out as the economics of the campaigns allow. So to relate it back to the previous point, the person in the cockpit can absolutely change your opportunity curve, because you can change that curve not just by changing your back-end metrics. You can get it by running better, more efficient, better designed, higher performing campaigns. So as you upgrade the talent level of the person managing the campaigns, you're going to push out your opportunity curve. You're going to get far better performance and higher growth. So that's why it's important, and that's why we connect those dots, and we're passionate about ensuring that people do have the right person in the cockpit. So the recommendation there, just honestly evaluate the person that's managing those campaigns. And if they're not at the master level, you might be leaving money on the table and losing market share. And I think it's just important to be honest with yourself about that. And then a tactical thing you can do as well is to review the change history on these campaigns and make sure that meaningful changes are being made frequently and not just minor bid changes here and there, which aren't going to probably move the needle very much for you. So that's how you'd go about number 6. Last one, number 7, audit ruthlessly. A full audit is a pretty meaty affair and contains over 30 areas of analysis. I've got some of them listed here, but how to think about the audit, is it's kind of like a health exam, right? As I say here, possibly unpleasant, but absolutely can save your ass, right? Important to do, right? You don't skip your medical exam, you do it, right? You show up and do it. And from a performance perspective, if you engage in audits, what you allow yourself to do is get exposed to different perspectives, and you get kind of the team of masters approach, and that's how you get absolute and maximum performance out of these campaigns. It's weird to me that more people aren't doing engaging in audits, and so we really strongly recommend people audit their campaigns and get different perspectives on how things are going over time. And we're offering to conduct audits for attendees of this webinar. For those spending over $50,000 a month, we're offering a free audit. And if that's something you'd be interested in taking us up on, you can visit us at the website address here, closedloop.com/audit. We do try to quantify the upside that we see, provide a report card. We run a number of the visuals that we've shared already in this webinar. And that brings me to the close of the presentation, and love to answer any questions that anybody has out there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lance. I love this. Yeah, definitely some interesting points there. And just a quick reminder to everyone that there is a link in the chat to the audit that Lance mentioned. And there's also a link back up in the chat about our virtual summit that we have recently just launched. Lance, I just want to make maybe a counterpoint to the mastery comparison, since I do find myself as more of the C3PO of the situation. It's funny because I feel like I'm an extremely good advertiser until I talk with somebody like you and I realize that well, the truth of the matter is that I believe the master should only come in when the budget reaches a certain point, right? So we shouldn't actually dedicate high-paid specialists until we have enough, essentially we're collecting data fast enough that making these optimizations actually improve performance in a similar way. Do you know what I mean? I mean, obviously a master at $5,000 a month can do pretty good work, but you're going to pay him $25,000 a month or $10,000, $15,000 to manage this account. I mean, I'm talking, of course, as an individual or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's like the master comes in as we reach those elements of scale. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think you've got to invest at the level that's appropriate. The catch-22 is that unfortunately it means that larger advertisers are going to continue to stretch their advantage over the smaller advertisers, and they're going to leave fewer opportunities for the smaller advertisers to outperform. But yeah, from I think just a pragmatic perspective, yeah, you're right. You can't afford to overinvest and hire the master if your overall budget level is too low.
So when do you feel like you can make that investment? So let's just say I've proven successful ad campaigns in AdWords. We're spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month, and I will talk about a client of mine. The rest of their marketing and sales funnel is jankety. They're still using a Google sheet to manage lead flow, but they're doing a couple of $100,000 a month in business. And do we wait to get the kind of that bottom portion of the funnel sorted out and then bring the master advertiser in for scale?
Probably. I mean, I know that's something that's in your wheelhouse. So, if you're able to improve your back-end campaign economics first, it always makes sense, to control the things you can control. So, and obviously the deeper funnel stuff and the post-click experience in economics are what really are going to give you that long-term advantage that you need. So yeah, in general, I would always recommend optimizing that conversion funnel and ideally that the business model prior to ramping up the dollars on the media side of things. Yeah, I do think that makes sense.
Perfect. And by the way, sorry about those formatting issues, everyone. That was completely my fault because I had Lance upload his slides. His slides are usually perfectly beautiful, and sorry about that, Lance. We do have a question here from Sabrina. She says, and this was a question I actually wrote down at the same time she asked it too. What tactics do you recommend for improving quality score? I've done the same thing as Sabrina, restructured campaigns, rewritten copy, updated landing pages, and it's like sometimes you just, change, even you can't get the score there. And I even saw in your post, closed loop changing the campaigns, you still have 1 quality score, 3 quality scores. So tell me about that process.
Sure. Let me start with the last point. You're never going to get all 10s. You're always going to have a distribution. The idea is to move the needle overall in terms of your average, your weighted quality score really, and make sure that at least in your highest spend areas that you're maxing out the quality scores overall. So it's kind of like moving a ship, and that what seemingly might be a minor swing, that 1 or 2 point average swing can have a massive impact on your ROI and what you pay. So it's worth doing. Even if it's another one of those cases where you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? If you can move a point or two, that's a success. That is fantastic. In terms of how to do it and how long to wait, Google, like every other system, wants to have a statistically significant amount of data on which to base its decisions, and so it creates another kind of catch-22. You might be tempted to break every keyword into its own ad group or campaign, right? On the one hand. On the other hand, if you do that, you might not get enough volume on that keyword over a reasonable time frame to get a statistically significant amount of data. So you've got to kind of find that balance, that happy medium. And group enough keywords and enough keyword volume into each ad group, into each campaign, so that you can get to some statistically significant results, so that you can hopefully be rewarded with a higher quality score. Hopefully, and ideally within, I'd say, in general, 3 months is more than enough to get a read. In most cases, it can be faster in higher volume accounts, but it shouldn't be much slower than that, in my view. How you do it, it's just it's basic blocking and tackling, but you've got to be kind of ruthless about really tightly aligning those keywords and ads and making sure that everything really is lined up. Constantly testing new ad copy and improving your click-through scores. Honestly, the biggest determinant in quality score is click-through rate. Google has acknowledged that, and they make a lot of recommendations about improving landing pages and so on, and that's important. You certainly want relevant landing pages more, on the conversion side of things, but the biggest thing you can do is to improve your click-through rates for search overall, and that's, again, for us, an argument on leaning more heavily on exact match than phrase or broad match. So, just getting really tightly targeted, getting really detailed with the campaigns and breaking it out to maximize relevance and therefore click-through rate, that's really what's going to move the needle the most from a quality score perspective.
I'm with you. I talked with Larry Kim on stage at Growth Marketing Conference this year, and he mentioned that a quote growth hack to increasing click-through rate was brand awareness, was things like Facebook ads or press and stuff like that, because if somebody knows your brand, they're more likely to click on your ad. What do you think about that?
He's dead on. The clients where we've had the most success are those that do have a balanced attack in terms of their overall marketing portfolio, and they have a good brand, they have a good product, they are constantly engaging in PR and getting their name in front of people such that more brand searches are being driven. Yeah, they are engaging in new channels and really, growing things on the social side, and it ends up creating this halo effect for you that pays off in unexpected ways sometimes.
Have you ever told a client, you know, a great way to increase your relevancy score here would be to go get some press? Have you ever turned around and said, here, take 10K of ad budget and go get that done? You know.
I mean, in general, yeah. I mean,
how far do we go?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I think it's a nice secondary benefit. I don't think I would hang my hat on it, though. You know, if a client can't rationalize doing that on its own, then it probably doesn't make sense to do it just to try to increase quality scores.
Gotcha. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let me grab. I wrote down a few more questions here. The way that you visualize that data, the spend data and performance data, is this your own little tool? Was this Excel painfully put together presentation kind of thing? What was that?
Well, it's certainly not Excel, I'll tell you that. No, we use Tableau as our data visualization tool, but we have built our own kind of data pipeline that pulls all the data from the ad platforms and then pulls some conversion data from the clients directly sometimes as well. And Tableau is a really powerful tool that we can blend all that together to create those visualizations. And that's something I didn't speak to, but it really is important to get your hands around your data flows and build your data pipeline so that you have these types of things at your fingertips more easily, because doing it manually and doing it via Excel is really painful.
It's impossible. Yeah, and I do it. Still, we have to do some of it through Excel at some point. It's never all visualized, but yeah, that is actually. I'm going through the process of setting up data visualization for clients right now, and it's like, how do you even operate your business without this? I don't even understand. Like how anything gets done. So that's awesome. Tableau is a great tool. I've used it before. Tell me, you mentioned briefly about programmatic ad buying. I just, basic question, what does programmatic ad buying mean to you? Because I hear this word around, but I hear it defined differently all the time.
Got it. Well, that's a dangerous question. Programmatic ad buying is, so I mean, you contrast it to how things were done historically. So historically, you know, we might have submitted an insertion order, you know, in the old days, like to Yahoo, which crazy isn't really around anymore. But so we might have said, look, we want to buy 1 million impressions on this page on Yahoo that, you know, has to do with this topic or subject matter, and Yahoo would guarantee they'd give us this many impressions on this page and, you know, in this ad format and so on, and we'd pay for that on a CPM basis. It wasn't even click based at the time. Then you know, move forward to AdWords, where it's dynamic, it's auction driven, and it's more bid based, but you still have control over where your ads show up and what keywords they're showing up for, and so on. And now you roll it over into programmatic, and that's where it starts to get kind of fun. And what you start doing is taking advantage of really machine learning algorithms out there, where the system decides for you how to target your ads. And you can give it some guidance, certainly, but it starts seeing what types of placements, what types of ad creative, what combinations of different factors tend to perform the best for you, and on an almost real-time basis, placing those ads for you in accordance with your goals. So it's great on the one hand in that it offloads you as the manager from having to figure out all of that granular stuff. It's kind of dangerous on the other hand, because it ends up being kind of a black box in a lot of cases, and you don't have complete transparency all the time as to where your ads are showing up. It also can be somewhat expensive, because there's a fair amount of technology required to power all of that. So that's programmatic at kind of a high level in terms of how I think about it. I wouldn't start with display there. I'd probably start with more remarketing. That's going to be your highest return form of display.
Yeah, and so it feels like all advertising this day, digitally at least, it has some form of this programmatic approach. We're expecting Google and Facebook to optimize for our results, our whatever we've set, our deepest funnel metric, as you said, for them to optimize for, right? So there should be something going on, right, by the platform pretty much 100% of the time, even though we wouldn't call that necessarily programmatic. So it's programmatic then when we add like an Acquisio or additional like machine learning algorithm on top of the platform's native one for making decisions?
Yes, I mean I don't think it's directly related to Acquisio. That's more of a bid management tool and kind of a front end on the platforms. The programmatic platform is really making the decision about how to target the ads, where they're going to show up, and which formats are performing best in some cases. But it's got a lot of different flavors as to how you can target that. But it is similar to kind of enabling automated bidding on search, for example. If you tell Google that, look, go ahead and manage my bids for me, subject to a $40 cost per lead, for example. That's that automated bidding, that machine learning algorithm that takes over for you at that point is similar in a lot of ways to programmatic buying, where you're telling the programmatic platform on the display side to say, look, I'm not going to tell you exactly where to run my ads, but I want you to drive a $40 cost per lead or a $5 cost per click, or maybe an equivalent CPM even. And I'm going to give these rough parameters on how to do it, and then you kind of figure out the details.
Okay, gotcha.
So hopefully that makes sense.
I'm with you. I have one final question for you, and then we gotta wrap up.
Yeah.
So, and we talked a little bit about it in my first question to you, but what if you're a startup that hasn't proven AdWords as a viable channel? When should you give up? How should you run tests? What are indicators of success? Like, when should I expect to be ROI positive? And I know this is like completely broad-based as a question that can't be answered, but what do you think about that when you're just starting out? Because I know that you're a mentor of 500 startups. I'm sure that you have to give this advice to a lot of founders.
Yeah, the recommendation is to start small, right? I mean, you can absolutely spend a lot of money on these campaigns, and Google's made it very easy to do that. But if you're not careful, you can lose a lot of money too, and you obviously don't want to do that, especially when you're just starting off. Every dollar is so precious. So I'd start small. Think about buying your brand terms. It's usually cheap. It allows you to start learning. It allows you to start building a quality score history. Maybe you layer on some remarketing after that. That's going to be high ROI, still relatively inexpensive, still very highly targeted, and just makes sense to do. I'd do some remarketing perhaps on Facebook on top of that. So I think of it as kind of concentric rings of value and volume. Start with your probably lower volume but highest value traffic targeting types, and then build out from there, and continue to test and learn along those ways. But at a point where it's lower dollars, somewhat lower risk, and you get to learn on the cheap, as you should as a startup.
I completely agree with you on the visualization of the rings of like kind of these lower hanging fruits, and retargeting being the main one, definitely. Absolutely. Lance, thank you so much for the presentation. I personally learned a lot. It was great. Everyone here, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see everyone at the Growth Marketing Virtual Summit, and that is summit.growthmarketingconf.com if you want to go check it out. Thank you to our sponsors, Business to Community, Growth Marketing Conference, and Bullpine Interactive. I'm Derek Haney from Bullpine Interactive. You can find me on the Twitters at @6peppers. That's at SIXPEPPERS. We will see you guys next time.